Hills Park Community Garden with Astrid Bowlby, who has honey petal plants, sells native plants, and she is going to talk a little bit today about fall cleanup and fall activities in the habitat garden and the pollinator garden. Astrid?
So it's a very busy day here. You can see we're working on, is this a water line, Alita?
Yes, a seasonal water line.
Okay, seasonal water line. And we're talking about what kind of gardening we can do now. I actually don't like to think about it as cleanup because cleanup reminds me of vacuuming, which I'm not really interested in.
Right.
But when I'm out here, I think, how can I extend my gardening season, help my garden, help the insects, have it look good, be prepared for next year so that I can hit the ground running. So a perfect example of this is, and a lot of people have different ideas about this. Some people cut everything down, but I like to leave lots of different things up for a bunch of different reasons. One is some of them look beautiful. Like you take this echinacea. First of all, it's still blooming. If it gets to be around 50 degrees, there'll be pollinators stirring that can still take pollen from this plant.
Absolutely.
You can see it in all its different stages, including going to seed. The seeds feed birds. The plant itself still looks great. As it dies back, these seed heads will become very pronounced and quite beautiful against the snow. So I leave echinacea for as long as I can. If it starts looking ratty, then you can cut it back. One other thing to keep in mind is that plants like echinacea, and down here we've got some asters, two different kinds. This plant is an awesome plant, and it still has some bloom on it. Now, a way to think about cutting this back is to cut it back partially. For example, to about there. And then what happens is all of this sort of lower vegetation offers opportunities for insects to overwinter. And one thing you can do is, instead of putting this on a compost heap, which you can do, is you can just kind of chop up the little pieces. And again, it offers shelter to pollinators, shelter to other insects over winter, and it breaks down and feeds the soil. So you're saving a trip to the compost heap. By spring, you won't even know it's there. You can add shredded leaves to your garden. That creates this beautiful sort of habitat for overwintering insects and also feeds your soil and creates humus.
And those aster seeds are going to feed birds as well.
Yes, that also. So just thinking in terms of how much cleanup and what to clean up. Now, another thing is they want it to feel tidy. They want to feel like they're starting off their spring well. One thing I concentrate on is edges and paths. So instead of worrying about cleaning up the beds per se, I will clean up the paths, I will rake the leaves off them, I will shred them or put them in the compost, or even just plop them right on the garden. And that way, it has that, you feel like it's a little bit less chaotic, right, with everything senescing and all the leaves falling off. But you're not making yourself a lot of extra work that's unnecessary and actually works against your goals of helping the insects and having a healthy garden.
Right. And, I often do the edges fairly formally, add mulch, get everything off of there, including the leaves. And then, like you said, have the interior be leaf litter, which is such fantastic habitat for all kinds of insect overwintering life stages.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised what that does. It's like being in your kitchen, right? And your kitchen is all messy. And you're like, and then you just clean off the table, wipe it down, and that one area makes everything else feel clearer. So
right, and cared for. That's important.
Absolutely.
And this is a public garden, so people are seeing it, and we've varied our treatments here a little bit based on the area of visibility in the garden.
Yeah, so for example, here there are some stems of annuals, and we just cut those annuals were done. It was cosmos. We just cut the stems down and laid them on the ground. So again, offering habitat, they'll break down into the soil by the springtime.
And not look too scraggly all winter.
Right, not look scraggly all winter. And then at some point in a couple of weeks, we'll go back through here. There may be some things that we need to take down. But right now we're trying to leave everything that looks good in the front here, we had a lot of annuals, a lot of sunflowers and everything. And because this front faces the parking lot, that has a kind of beauty, but it's not always a beauty that people are convinced of. It takes a little bit of talking to them about it. You know, if you think about a Van Gogh painting of sunflowers or a winter scene, sometimes, you know, it's not flowery, it's brown, it's going quiet. That is a little bit, I have learned to see that as beautiful, but I think it's a little bit tricky. So what we did here is we've got this gorgeous fence, right? So that acts as a kind of a garden feature.
Right.
And so instead of leaving all that big scraggly plant material up, which you can see in these bins here from the sunflowers, we cut that down to expose the fence. However, a few stems were left. Because right here, what you've got is, you've got a really pithy interior in these sunflower stems, and bees can excavate in there and then use that as a little nesting area.
So it was cut, about 20 inches off the ground, which is considered to be a good height to leave a partial stem standing and provide habitat.
Yes, and the great thing about that is, for example, with a strong growing tall perennial like a Monarda fistulosa or a New England aster, you do not have to finish cutting those off in the spring. Just leave them there. They actually serve as habitat the entire year, and your New England aster or your Monarda fistulosa will grow up, hide those stems, and actually those lower stems will act as support for the taller plant.
Right. Wonderful. Okay, we're going to stop there, Astrid, and maybe we'll have some more posts on fall cleanup in the pollinator garden for all of you to see on our website.